If defense wins championships, all the Mets have to do is keep playing like they did on Saturday night.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, the New York Mets have now won 6 games in a row. They win another series on the road, which is always a pleasant sign because this team has not played very well on the road this season, but they start off this road trip with a couple of wins against a couple of all-star pitchers and just great team efforts all around. You had an outstanding start by David Peterson. The bullpen held up behind him. You had a big hit by Mark Vientos, but really what this game came down to was defense. David Peterson had some balls hit hard against him. Now, he was cool, calm, and collected. He made all the big pitches when he needed to, but his defense certainly helped him out behind him. In the first inning, you had Peterson give up a base hit and a walk with 1 out. That brought up Matt Chapman with a chance to do some damage early for the Giants. He rips a line drive, but Mark Vientos makes a leaping catch. You had the runner at second base dead to rights. Vientos made a pretty brutal throw to second base, but Brett Baty dug it out, and Peterson got a double play to get out of that jam. Second inning, Peterson gave up a couple of singles, but again, he got a double play to get out of the inning. This one, a ground ball to Brett Baty for a 4-6-3 double play. Third inning, Peterson got 3 ground balls, 2 more great plays by Pete Alonso, who has just played outstanding defense in this series. The first one was, you could call it a comebacker to David Peterson, but really, it was a ground ball that was heading down towards the third base line in the infield, and Peterson did a great job getting off the mound, getting over there, and really that was the first part of that play, was just getting to the baseball and getting a throw over to first base. But his throw was inside, and Peterson, Alonso had to get off the bag into foul territory to catch it and then reach out and make the tag. So that was one good play by Pete. You then had a routine ground ball to Francisco Lindor, then a ground ball on the other side of the second base bag that Lindor ranged over to get, spun around, made the throw to first, and it was a really tough pick. But Pete Alonso was able to come up with it, and that got Peterson through the third inning. The fourth inning, again, Peterson dealing with traffic, gave up 2 singles, picked up a strikeout, then walked a batter to load the bases, gets a soft ground ball that scores a run as the Mets just couldn't turn 2 on it. And then he gets a pop-up to get out of that jam. Fifth inning, he gave up a single and a walk, but struck out 3 batters in between, able to strand those 2 runners. Sixth inning, the Mets finally got Peterson some runs as they really struggled early on against Robbie Ray, had some chances, but could not convert. In the first inning, thanks to an error, the Mets did get 2 runners on, couldn't do much with it. The next inning, Francisco Alvarez hits a 2-out triple, but was stranded as Tyrone Taylor just continues to be a pretty easy out at the bottom of the Mets lineup. Fourth inning, they load the bases for Mark Vientos. He strikes out. Then Francisco Alvarez hits into a double play, and so the Mets strand all 3. And then, finally, in the 6th inning, Mark Vientos makes up for it as Juan Soto draws a leadoff walk, steals second base after Pete Alonso flew out. Starling Marte drew a walk. Brett Baty hit a ground ball to Rafael Devers that I don't think they could have turned 2 on anyway, but big difference in this game with the Giants defense versus the Mets defense. And a lot of it was Devers, who's still learning first base. He boots the ground ball a little bit, was able to get the out at first base, so there was no error on the play. But that put 2 runners in scoring position for Mark Vientos, and he made the Giants pay. Ripped a double into the left field corner. At that point, Robbie Ray was on his last legs. He really had to work through every single inning. You got to give the Mets credit for that at least. They were able to drive up the pitch count, and have really extended at-bats. And then it was Vientos that got the one big hit of the day. That was really it. He doubles in those 2 runs, and that's all the Mets would score, a game-winning double in the 6th inning. Mets couldn't do anything else beyond that. But again, it was about defense and pitching that got them through this game. Bottom of the 6th inning with Peterson still on the mound, you had Wilmer Flores rip one down the third base line, hits off that sidewall, Nimmo plays it perfectly, bare hands it, and has a great throw at second base. Acuna able to put the tag on Flo. As we know, he has never run well. And the Mets were very fortunate there that instead of a runner on second base with nobody out, it was an out for David Peterson, and he got through the rest of that 6th inning. All told, David Peterson goes 6, allows 8 hits, 3 walks, and yet, despite giving up 11 base runners, only 1 crossed the plate, 4 strikeouts, lowers the ERA to 2.83 in the season. He just continues to be outstanding. Behind him, Reed Garrett was dominant in the 7th, a 1-2-3 frame. He picked up a couple of strikeouts. Ryan Stanek, a 1-2-3 8th. 9th inning with Edwin Diaz, it was actually kind of a fortunate save for Edwin. First batter hits an absolute scorcher to Brett Baty. It was just hit right at Brett Baty for the first out. Then Jung-Hoo Lee nearly leaves the yard, hits one to deep right center field off the top of that huge wall they have out in San Francisco. Has to settle for a double. Great play by Juan Soto, who played that ball off the brick perfectly to hold a speedy runner to just second base instead of what could have clearly been a triple. And then all of a sudden, with 1 out, you're a fly ball away from, potentially a tie game. Instead, runner stays on second base. And Edwin Diaz did pick up a big strikeout for the 2nd out. But then the final out of the game, it looked like a base hit. A line drive that was heading into right field, but Pete Alonso timed it absolutely perfectly, leaped up, made the catch, had a nice celebration after as he wins the game for the Mets. 2-1 victory. We talk about it all the time on this show. If you're going to be a good team, you have to win games in different ways. And this game was won by pitching and defense. The Mets lineup could not get a lot going. Again, they had some opportunities, but Robbie Ray, you have to credit him as well. Really good starting pitcher. They have some dynamite arms that come out of that bullpen for the Giants. There was one at bat that Nimmo had the bases loaded against. I want to say it's Ryan Walker was the pitcher for the Giants in that. I want to say it was the 7th inning because I think it was after Robbie. Or maybe it was in the 6th inning. Actually, it might have been in the 6th inning after Robbie Ray gave up that double. They might have gone to Walker. I actually think it was in the 6th. And he walked a couple of batters. But he made Brandon Nimmo just look foolish. I mean, just threw a backdoor breaking ball to get the first strike, painted from he's a weird arm angle. He sort of is super closed off, tough to pick up the baseball, even for a left-hander. Sneaks in a second strike and then the third one as well. Nimmo never got the bat off his shoulders. Clearly looked uncomfortable. So it was just a tough game for the Mets. This is a Giants team that does pitch very well, and it's a tough ballpark to hit. So while the Mets only scored 2 runs, I'm not going to knock the offense too much in this game. They did what they had to do. They were able to pick up their 6th win in a row, and they hold on to their lead right now in the NL East. They'll be the Phillies one as well. They did. They beat the Yankees. So it's still a half-game lead, if I'm not mistaken. Looking real quick here. Still a half-game lead. They got a game up in the win column. They're even in the loss column with the Phillies. We'll see if the Yankees can win one on Sunday, if the Mets can complete a sweep. But really good performance so far in this series. We talked about it going in. It's going to be a bullpen game for the Giants on Sunday, and you have Kodai Senga on the mound. I said, hey, get Senga a rubber match on Sunday, and I feel like the Mets can win this series on the road. Well, they were able to beat a couple of all-stars in Logan Webb and Robbie Ray and take this series outright before you even hand the ball to Senga with a chance to sweep. So a great series so far, but what I want to talk about in the next segment, as you might have caught on to from the title of the show today, I feel like the deadline plans for the Mets are getting more and more clear. The pathway for what the Mets should be doing here is just making more and more sense with each passing game. I want to explain what I'm talking about with that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. We can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you can actually start to build wealth. When I was using Monarch, I was shocked at just how much I was wasting each month, from subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying to takeout orders that really stack up the more you pay attention. I realized using Monarch how to spend my money better. I took control of my finances. You can too with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. I believe we're either at 100 away or within 100. I would really appreciate everyone who subscribes. So I'd love to get to that next goal of 14,000 subscribers by the deadline this week. And also make sure you have the notification bell on so you know whenever we go live. I'll be going live whenever there is a breaking news, item. If there's a trade or something that happens that involves the Mets, I'll be going live this week. You have Chris Schubert that goes live after every Mets game, after the final out for our Locked On Mets postcast. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you know what is coming when it relates to our coverage of the New York Mets. Now, as I say in the title, I think the deadline path is becoming more and more clear for the New York Mets. We've been talking about this stuff for weeks now. As you are seeing this market develop, Ahmed Rosario gets traded to the Yankees. They're jumping the market for third baseman. He's going to be platooning out, I would imagine, with Ryan McMahon. You also had Randall Grichuk go to the Royals. So it appears like the Royals are not necessarily going to be selling this year. They continue to buy. The Diamondbacks, on the other hand, who had Grichuk, continue to sell. I'm looking at this Mets team, and I watched Starling Marte's at-bats so far in this series, but particularly this game. Every at-bat, he's hitting the ball hard. He goes 2 for 3 with a walk. You look at what Starling Marte has done this year. If you go back pre-injury, he now has 5 consecutive multi-hit games. That is not nothing. And if you go back to April 8th, over his last 53 games played, and this is not including the 2 for 3 night today, Marte's hitting 282, 358 on base, 391 slug. It's a 749 OPS. If you go to his stats since May, he's hitting 322, 388 on base, 326 slug. Now, you look at a 322 average with a 326 slug. Not a lot more than a singles hitter at this point in his career for Starling Marte. The occasional double like he had in this game today. But an 814 OPS and a guy that's giving you good at-bats. And the more that I watch Marte, the more that I see Mark Vientos, who's definitely swinging a better bat. Francisco Alvarez looks a lot better. Brett Baty continues to be a professional at-bat out there, and he's giving you great defense. He's a starter at this point. I really laughed when Gary Cohen said on the broadcast that the Mets are maybe playing Brett Baty every day to give other teams a good look at him. What are you talking about, Gary? I mean, that was one of the silliest comments that he's made this year. Brett Baty is playing every day because he's earned an everyday role in this team. It's that simple. I don't think that the Mets were playing Brett Baty in the game to, put him out there for trades instead of starting him over Jeff McNeil just because he's earned it. He has earned everyday playing time, and he gives you more flexibility when you start him because you can move him over to third base. And yes, Jeff McNeil can move out to center field. You can always make that call. But by having Jeff McNeil on the bench, you can pinch hit him. You can do some different things with Baty. I think you just trust you're going to get 9 innings of good defense at second base and third base. He'll play the first probably 6 innings at second, and then he'll slide over to third to close out the game and continues to give you a good at-bat. So when you start to look at position by position for the Mets, obviously we know first base, shortstop, left field, right field, those spots were never going anywhere. And catcher, you're just not going to find anything of value at the deadline anyway. And luckily, Francisco Alvarez looks like he's playing better baseball since coming back up. So those spots have always been locked in. The question marks this year have consistently been second base, third base, center field, and DH. What are you going to do with those 4 spots? Now look at third base, and David Stern said it a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago at this point. The Mets are not looking to address third base at this deadline. Now, Eugenio Suarez, if the market wasn't there and the Diamondbacks were going to trade him, sure. But it seems like the Cubs are all in on him. The Mariners are all in on him. The Tigers might be in on him. There's a lot of teams that are sniffing around the Diamondbacks for Eugenio Suarez. He's going to cost too much. It's just not going to happen. Ryan McMahon's already been dealt, and that would not have made sense for the Mets anyway. So you look at the infield. Do the Mets have to go out and get an infielder? I have said for a couple weeks now that Willie Castro is a guy that any contender could, absolutely use, and he could be the second baseman of the match. You keep Baty at third, and you roll with Jeff McNeil in center. But I don't know if the Mets have to do that. I really don't think they do. I don't think they give up anything of value for Willie Castro. If you're going to get some pitching from the Twins, I would ask for Willie Castro as part of that deal. Certainly, if you're going to get Griffin Jackson or Jaron Duran, guys that are going to cost a ton, Willie Castro is the guy that can just get thrown into a trade to put a package over the top for the other side because he's a rental utility man that's not going to get that much anyway. So, sure, I wouldn't say I'd completely give up on that pursuit, but I look at this team and I go to third base and I say, all right, well, you have Brett Baty, you have Mark Vientos, you have Ronnie Mauricio. One of those three guys will be playing good enough baseball by October, and it's probably Baty. Second base, you have Jeff McNeil, you have Brett Baty, you have Luis Angel Acuna. For McNeil, if you can get him into the infield, that's his best position. I think the Mets' best possible infield is Alonso at first, McNeil at second, Lindor at short, Baty at third, and just set it and forget it come October. I really do think that's the best the Mets can do. But if you need to play Baty at second because you want Mauricio or Vientos to start at third and McNeil to start in center, you still have that ability to do so. And then the DH position, should the Mets just go out there and trade for Ryan O'Hearn because they can give some DH at bats to anybody, really? I don't think so, because Starling Marte continues to basically be the guy that is going to get a hit 3 times out of every 10 at bats. And while he might not slug much, while he's not going to impact the baseball in the way that Mark Vientos can, and you hope Vientos does grab the DH spot, Marte's not bad, and he's hitting righties and lefties. You have a good floor option there, and you still have Jesse Winker that, if he can ever get healthy this year, is another option, and you have Vientos. So I look at third base and DH, and I think the Mets are fine. I look at second base, I think they're fine. And so as I continue to say, from yesterday's show to today, and it feels like every day we're talking about it, center field is the one place you can add a bat. But I don't think you have to be uber aggressive at adding a bat. I think you remain engaged on the markets for Cedric Mullins, Harrison Bader, and Luis Robert. Personally, I'm not really even a fan of Cedric Mullins. I would more look at Bader and Robert. And if you can end up getting one of those guys near the deadline because you're able to pull off the right package, or if the White Sox are canvassing the market for Luis Robert trades and they're not really getting many teams that are interested in biting on the salary, maybe there's a deal that's worked out before the deadline. But I think the Mets are in a position of leverage where they can go out and get a center fielder like a Bader, who would raise your floor a significant margin, I would say, over Tyrone Taylor. He's just a better player right now. Or you get Luis Robert, who I think the floor is right where Taylor's is. He gives you a potential platoon partner for Jeff McNeil, as I've been talking about, because he rakes against left-handed pitching. And he has an incredibly high ceiling that a change of scenery could unlock. So Robert still, to me, is the number one bat the Mets can get because he just fits this roster. But I don't think that you're pursuing a DH or an infielder. If you're going to get a bat, it's a center fielder, and those are the 3 guys that are on the market. So we'll just see what happens there. I think as the deadline gets closer, the Mets' needs are pretty clear. Address the bullpen as best as you can. Try to get the best possible arm to give you a real second closer, in my opinion. I still think that that's something that the Mets should value, getting a David Bednar. I think that would go a long way for this team. But regardless, continuing to address that bullpen is going to be big. Gregory Soto will be active for Sunday's game, so we'll see how he fits into the mix. That'd be good to see him pitch. I'm sure he's going to be one of the arms the Mets call on if there's a leverage opportunity, because all the other guys really did pitch on Saturday, so we'll see what they do there. But it's address the bullpen. It's be opportunistic on the starting pitching market. I'd say the same thing about the center field market. That's where the Mets are at right now at this deadline. And when you see Starling Marte swinging the bat the way he is, Mark Vientos continue to look better and better. You see, Brett Baty and Francisco Alvarez really feel like they're no longer giving away at bats the way they have throughout large portions of their career. And you still have enough star power at the very top with Nimmo, Lindor, Soto, and Alonso, as well as Jeff McNeil is having a great season. This team is in a really good spot. They really are. And they've won 6 in a row, which is awesome for them to be riding some momentum right now. And I really think this is a momentum that can carry, because this is a team that last year learned how to win in a real way. They've made some key additions to this roster, like, of course, none other than Juan Soto. And you now are at a point in the season where you're past the All-Star break. We're about to be through the deadline. There's nothing to look forward to but October and getting there in the best possible position and making a run once you're there. And it feels like a lot of the noise has started to fade a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot of deadline buzz because that's where we're at in the calendar. But this team had their rough stretch of baseball. Maybe they made their way to the other side of it. And from here on out, they're just going to get hot and stay hot and finish the season strong. They're certainly playing much better here over the last week. So we'll see if they can finish off the sweep on Sunday. I want to talk about that a little bit here to close out the show, give you a quick Game 3 preview. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service. We get updates from me anytime news breaks from the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. Need a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know it's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description and go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Now, one other thing that I was realizing during the break that I forgot to mention when it relates to the Mets and their deadline plans, and I know I talked about it on yesterday's show, but I think it's worth repeating again. If the Mets get a center fielder, one of the things that I've sort of turned on when it comes to my opinion about this deadline is I don't think under any circumstances, quite honestly, with what's out there at this deadline, unless you do pull off the trade for Gino Suarez, but outside of that, I don't think it makes any sense for this team to trade one of the young infielders. And I have definitely moved off that opinion because, again, I did a show a couple weeks ago about Ronnie Mauricio and why the Mets could save their farm system by trading Ronnie at this deadline. Unless it's for a top-end starting pitcher, like let's just say the Mets decide, you know what, they think they can fix Sandy, and the Marlins want Mauricio. Well, under that context, if you really think Sandy is going to help you win a World Series this year, I can get my head around it. And if you traded Vientos under the same construct, okay. But the reason why I think center field makes so much sense for the Mets is because if you get a center fielder in August, you're going to have to make a roster move. Now, right now, there's not really a lot of guys you can trim off this roster. So I think if they were to get Luis Robert, it would be Ronnie Mauricio that gets sent down. But there is nothing wrong with Ronnie Mauricio playing every single day in the month of August in Syracuse, knowing, hey, in September, you're right back up. And then in September, you bring Ronnie Mauricio back up, and after giving Luis Robert, or if it is Harrison Bader, a month to play nearly every day in center field, if you decide that your best bet come October is Jeff McNeil back in center field and some other semblance of an infield combination, whether that is Mark Vientos at third, Baty at second, a Winker Marte platoon is suddenly viable again at DH, okay. If that's Mauricio at third, Baty at second, Vientos at DH, you can do that, whatever it is. In September, you can then play around a little bit. But the Mets have that flexibility with this roster where if they get a center fielder, yes, they're going to have to make a move. They're going to have to send somebody down. Theoretically, you could send an Acuna as well, but I think the Mets really believe in Acuna in the role that he's in right now. It's just one of those things where sending him down for a month might not really help too much, and you preserve an option if you keep him up at the big league club, which could be very valuable for your team next year, where maybe Acuna does get sent down a couple times. You never really know. For Mauricio, yes, you would burn an option if you send him down, but I feel like with Ronnie Mauricio, he would be a candidate to either stay on the roster and be an everyday player the next year or be a guy that is in trade rumors again in the offseason. So anyway, I wanted to include that real quick here because that was another big part of my whole the trade deadline path is getting clear. Part of that, again, as I alluded to on yesterday's show as well, is I think the Mets should just keep everybody that's contributing to the big league roster. When you're a contender, you really shouldn't move anyone. That's why the idea that the Mets would trade Marte, and yes, they're getting interest in the market. Some teams have been calling about Starling Marte as a guy that they probably think, you know what, worst case, plug him into our DH spot, and he gives us a right-handed bat. Marte swinging the bat too well. He's too big a part of this team as a leader. Let him ride out the rest of this contract. And I feel like when you look back at that deal for Starling Marte, the 4-year contract that back in they signed in the 2021 offseason heading to 2022. Man, I was banging the table for Marte as loud as anybody at the time. And you're going to look at an up and down 4 years for a guy that's now in his late 30s, but an all-star season in 2022, horrible year in 2023. But 2024, he was decent in the regular season, but great in the playoffs. And this year, he's been really solid. So, again, I'm keeping all these guys when it comes to the Mets bats, and I'm just looking at center field. But anyway, let's talk about game 3 here, Mets versus Giants. Really important to keep on winning these games because the Giants are still hanging around the wild card, and I don't necessarily expect the Mets to be fighting for the 3rd wild card spot come the end of September, but you just never know what's going to happen, and you want to have as many tiebreakers as possible. If you win the game on Sunday, all you got to do is win one game against the Giants when they come to Citi Field next week, and you're good. You have that tiebreaker locked up. And you have Kodai Senga going up against a Giants bullpen game. So I feel like the Mets are in a good spot, especially because 4 relievers were used in this game on Saturday. And how many were used on Friday? think a good amount because Logan Webb did not make it very long in that game. Let's see real quick. Mets win 8-1. They used 4 relievers. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they navigate it. I'd imagine they might call up some type of a bulk arm from AAA, but regardless, the Mets have a huge advantage going into Sunday Night Baseball with Kodai Senga on the mound, pitching in a pitcher's ballpark, which I think is going to give Senga a real confidence to attack the zone because it's tough to get burned in San Francisco. And I think that's also why Tyrone Taylor's played all these games, just to give you it's a tough center field for Jeff McNeil to play. So I do imagine that maybe Baty gets a day and you see McNeil in there at second base with Mauricio at third and Vientos at DH. If I had to guess, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way the Mets decide to line things up. But regardless, the big thing is to watch Kodai Senga at his continued progression. Hopefully it's a good start for him and you can continue to maybe, save this bullpen a little bit with, no days off on Monday here. So you're going to roll right into a series against the Padres. But the Mets have already done a pretty good job to get this road trip off on a good note. If you told me going in, the Mets would go 3-3 on this road trip, I probably would have taken it. Now, obviously, the goalpost changed a little bit. Things, are certainly looking much better than a 3-3 road trip. So you go out and you sweep a series, and then maybe you could beat the Padres in a series and have a great road trip leading into the deadline. But things have really set themselves up for the Mets here in San Francisco, and they were able to do the tough work early, beat a couple of all-stars, win one game thanks to your bats, and of course, overall good pitching performance between Clay Holmes and the bullpen behind him pitching with a huge lead, and then David Peterson in the bullpen getting the job done with great defense behind them. Mets able to win a game 2-1. So we'll see what they do. We'll see if they finish it off. I'll have another show for you guys on Monday morning, barring, of course, any big news. If we get a trade, I'm always going to try to get live on YouTube as soon as possible to break it down and give you guys my rapid reaction to any of your Mets news. If you want to be plugged in, right now is the time to be a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service, and you start with a free trial. So if you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, now's the time to do it. You can find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On Sports Today. It's the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that covers absolutely everything in the world of sports with our local experts from each team, league-wide experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.